Well, good morning, folks. This is a ripper today because we're talking to Greg Diamond. Now, Greg spoke at our Blokes Talk Beachside mental health meeting last week for men, and it was just so fantastic. People had said to me even before the meeting what a great speaker and educator he is. So I wanted to delve down today in our Leading Your Best Life podcast to talk about some of the areas Greg's passionate about, his background, and how he can help you, be you male or female, in the area of health, optimizing your health and leading your best life. So Greg, welcome to Leading Your Best Life.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you. I appreciate the call up.
Mate, well, you're so good last week and so many people got so much out of it, your slides, the information and the engaging way you presented. It was just fantastic. So let's delve into that today, but let's start with the Greg Diamond story. Where have you come from? There might be a bit of an accent there. I'm not quite sure. So where were you born? What's been your journey to get to where you are?
Look, I was born in New Zealand, but I came out here when I was 3. It just happened that my dad, who was a Kiwi, met my mum, who was a Perth girl in New Zealand, got married there, had a few kids, then decided to come back to Perth for a better life. And I was raised in Perth, raised primarily around Claremont, Cottesloe, the western suburbs boy.
You've got that western suburbs glow about you, I can tell, yeah.
We don't want to put too many people off here.
Yeah.
Look, life was interesting. My dad was hard living, hard drinking, a product of a very kind of brutal childhood himself.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't an easy childhood, I have to say. There was a lot of violence in our home, alcoholism, and difficulty in that regard, which was painful at the time. But I now look on it as a blessing because it changed probably the direction of my thinking, in that I sought something better from life, and I guess that's been kind of the journey. Both my folks were physiotherapists, so I was probably destined to go down that track or look at that as a profession, which I did. And I'm a physiotherapist by profession, and I say a personal development tragic by inclination.
I'm going to make a note of that. Personal development tragic. I can relate to that, but I've never heard that term before. But personal development, I feel that's potentially a good T-shirt straight away. I am a personal development tragic. I like it.
By inclination. And that all began when I was about 14. My mother, who was involved in a multi-level marketing company at that stage, she was taking a divergence in her career at the time, and she was, I guess, looking to improve our family fortune by going to an MLM. And they used to have these weekends where new recruits would come in and they would expose them to positive personal development stuff and get them fired up and motivated to pursue the business. And she thought it'd be good for my older brother and I to go along to one of these. I was 14 at the time. So I went along to this.
Who was it? Amway, or who was she with?
It was actually a company called Holiday Magic.
Okay.
Heavily into cosmetics. They got torpedoed along the way they were accused of, being a multi-level marketing scam, which I don't think they were. Just looking back, they seemed to have all the successful things that make a good MLM today, they had in place, but they were early. They were early to the program, and I think they got kind of taken out. But this long weekend, it was a Monday, it was a Friday to a Monday, and I went along as a 14-year-old, and the room was filled with about 30 adults, and my brother and I, he was 15. And I sat there being a bit overwhelmed by the whole situation. But it was that meeting where I was first exposed to some of the gurus of personal development, like, Earl Nightingale and Norman Vincent Peale and Napoleon Hill and these kind of characters. And I heard the dulcet tones. They played that great classic LP that Earl Nightingale made, which was
The Greatest Secret.
The Greatest Secret, yeah. And then they showed a video of him giving this that same talk to a group of his salesmen, and I was hooked. I was
Mm.
hooked, and it was so positive. And my life up to that point had been fairly hard and harsh, and I guess looking for something that was had a positive bent to it, and also the fact that we weren't trapped where we were, that there was a way out, and it's the way we think, and the way we think of, not only the way we think, but the way we think about situations, and that reframing the situations that we're in. I found it incredibly helpful. And at the end of the seminar, they gave us all Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
Oh my goodness.
So I read that as a 14-year-old. Now,
Wow.
I have to say half of it kind of went over my head at the
Sure.
time, but I've read it.
Transmutation of the sex desire. At a 14-year-old, it's like, what the hell? I don't want any sex desire transmutated just yet. Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was part of that probably went over my head. But
Yeah.
look, it gave me some hope that life could be different from what I
Yes.
was experiencing at
Lovely.
the time. And I reread Napoleon. If anyone's interested, it's the classic business book of all time, I guess.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
And I've read it 4 or 5 times since, and I've got the audio book, and I get it out every now and again and have a re-listen and so on. So I think it was a great thing. Look, then I was educated in the western suburbs. I was a St. Louis boy, Jesuit trained, and that's John 23rd College these days.
Yes.
But that was a great. I enjoyed my school. I'd have to confess, I enjoyed the Jesuits. I enjoyed I know people have had their issues with their Catholic education, but
Sure.
I actually enjoyed mine and
Well, there's
found
a
it.
lot of high-performing Jesuits over the years. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, including our Pope at the moment. He's a Jesuit. But so I enjoyed my schooling, and I did okay at school. I wasn't a standout kind of intellectually, but I enjoyed it, and I got through it, and eventually got into to uni and
Did you
did my.
do sport? What was your sport that you played?
Oh, being a Kiwi son, I was
Mm.
based on rugby union, so that
Yeah.
was my sport. I
Mm.
was yeah, bruised and
Well, there
battered.
was no alternative. There was no alternative there.
Oh
Yeah.
no, but
Yeah.
if I played AFL, I would have been disowned.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Dad used to, yeah, he called it aerial ping pong and all that
Mm.
sort of stuff, and had a red
Mm.
hot better. But having been raised here, and I played, I wasn't a great Aussie rules player. I was a pretty good rugby player, and I enjoyed my rugby, but I love my AFL as well. Having been raised here, I've got a fondness for both codes, and cricket was probably the other game that took my time and attention. So
Yeah.
pretty stock standard from that perspective. But yeah, no, I do. I love my AFL. I'll put all the Dockers supporters off now, but I'm a firm Eagles supporter, and follow the Wallabies, who tragically aren't doing all that well at the moment.
Mm.
But yeah, no, that was my sort of sporting background, which was.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So you did physio. So something got you, and as you say, I mean, clearly that's just fantastic. The being immersed in personal development via MLM, and I think in many ways MLM has introduced so many people to personal development. Goal setting and communication and
Oh,
resilience and all of those factors. And
yeah,
as you say, between The Greatest Secret, Earl Nightingale, and Think and Grow Rich, well, they're two of the absolute classics in terms of, as you say, and I made the note there, the way out is the way we think.
yeah.
The way we think is not a prison, or it can be if you choose it to be. So when and how did you start getting involved in the area of neuroscience and the sorts of things you spoke to the group about last week?
Yeah. I think I told the group the story that, when I was in second year physio, because part of our course is neurology. So the study of the brain, and particularly brain injury, and how that affects movement, obviously, and how physios are involved in rehabilitating people from brain injury. Now, at the time, I found the whole study of the brain pretty full on, pretty difficult. It's probably one of the hardest areas of our biology to kind of get into and understand.
Mm.
And I didn't do well. I actually failed that semester, and I had to repeat that semester in neurology.
Mm.
but interesting, which is an interesting take on how our neurology actually works, is that the second time I did it, I actually found it a lot easier and actually a lot more fascinating. And it started my interest in how the brain works. Now, that was at that stage purely from a physiotherapy point of view, and going forward in terms of because I worked at Royal Perth Hospital for about 5 years, so I did a bit of rehabilitation of stroke patients and head injured patients, etc. So that was part of that. But my key area of interest was more musculoskeletal. So I got more into the musculoskeletal issues, problems, sports injuries and spinal injuries and so on. That was my postgraduate study, which I did while I was at Royal Perth. And then after I left Royal Perth, I entered into private practice. So I ended up having a pretty successful Western Suburbs private practice in the area of musculoskeletal medicine. But I always maintained this interest in the brain, how we think, how we form our ideals, our ethics, our morals, but also how our brain is is the instrument really of our success in life, and that yes, there certainly luck can play a part in things like that, and now where we live and how we live and where we were raised, but all of us, except obviously if it's damaged, all of us have a brain that can literally change the direction of our life by the way we think. And that key has been something that has been very formative in my life. I'd have to say, when I was studying, now I was, again, as a student, particularly at uni, I call myself a 50% student. That is, if I got 51% past the subject, you're guilty. I was happy. I wasn't flying high as an academic. But in my third year, I did a course with a guy called Lewis E. Tice. Now, he's an American guy.
The Lou Tice, absolutely, yeah.
Tice, yeah. And motivational kind of speaker. And I did his course through a church group, actually. They introduced the youth group, etc., to doing this. And it was again a direct flow on from that early stuff that I did as a 14-year-old. And
sure.
And as a 14-year-old, I came out of that weekend pumped, ready to take on the world. But of course, if you don't have continuing input and as a 14-year-old, I didn't have the skills and the strategies to continue to put that stuff into place. When I did the Lou Tice course, it was that, but better. And again, after doing that short course, he left us with actual strategies and tactics to maintain that kind of motivation, and also the strategies to improve our brain function and so on. So I found that incredibly helpful, and it actually radically changed I became an 80% student, not a 50% student.
Wow, that's fantastic.
It had a direct effect. That's what sold me on it. I thought, oh my God, doing these affirmations and visualizations and all the stuff that people have probably heard about radically changed my kind of my trajectory as a student at that point.
So you got strategies to implement and then have daily practices, regular practice. And of course, as you say, how that then links in with the neuroplasticity and the neural pathways, which I'm sure we'll talk about. So Pacific Institute, from what I recall, were the people with Lou Tice, and they literally, Lou Tice tapes were all over Perth at one stage during the 80s and 90s because the Pacific Institute did such a fantastic job. So clearly they got into your church group as well. But at the same time, it means, so I gather did you end up with the tapes as part of that program or not?
I did.
Yeah, right. There you go. So that basically everyone got the tapes.
Actually, I went back, Lee, and I did the course about another 3 times.
Did you? Wow.
Over the 10 years.
Pacific Institute must have loved you.
Oh, they did. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've got tapes, DVDs, CDs, you name it, I've got it.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
And that's led me into, more of obviously your modern practitioners, your Tony Robbins and your Wayne Dyers and, all these gurus in that space now that
absolutely
I've followed over the years and got so much help and input from.
Fantastic. So as you say, the development these days, because you made that point in your talk the other day that, you know, way back in uni days, because I did in 1976, I did at Melbourne Uni, we had a unit called Brain and Behaviour, where we were literally cutting up brains and studying brains and reading papers on brain function. And certainly the paradigm at that point in time was the brain is pretty much set at age 25. There's no changes. That's what it is, what you got. And then there's the only thing that happens then is damage to it via accident. And they have all these papers of in World War I, when guys were popping their heads above the trenches and 303s were going, and they went, oh boy, the bullet went straight through the brain, and all it did was affect that particular field of vision. So even at that point, they must have gone, wow, a lot of damage was done, but that person is still functioning pretty okay. But somehow they've gone, the brain's kind of magical, but they certainly didn't say that the brain had neuroplasticity, or, you know, that new neural pathways were formed. So when did you get into that, and what are some of the, I mean, I know some fantastic papers you've read, but let's talk a bit about that neuroplasticity and forming of neural pathways.
Yeah, look, I was the same as you. Back in the day, we were told, you know, neurology that you know, by the age of 3, all the pathways are set up. You've got what you've got, and everything, it's all downhill from that point on.
Yeah.
Which was, you know, fairly disheartening, really.
Mm.
But now we understand that the brain is constantly changing. That I think I was saying to you guys, David Eagleman gave me this image. He's a neuroscientist, and he was talking about how your neurons, which are the basic cell that makes up the brain, they're like the head of the Hydra from mythology, with the multiple heads, and that they're up and they're being attentive to all the neurons around them, and they're looking for connection constantly. So we never lose our ability to make new connections. Now, we do have a limited number of neurons. We're born with about 100 billion of them, and we lose some over time. That's called pruning. So particularly neurons that don't get used get pruned, get lost. So part of the agenda is to keep your brain stimulated. But there are actually 2 small areas of the brain that do seem to have what they call neurogenesis, where you can actually get new brain cells formed. One is the hippocampus, which is involved with memory, very important area of the brain. And there is a small area which is involved with smell, believe it or not, which seems to be able to produce new neurons as well. We won't go into that. But that hippocampus is really important because of this attachment, or this link to memory. That the fact that it can produce new brain cells is really important. But what our brain can do constantly through our life is make new connections. And what's interesting is that one neuron has the potential to make connections with up to 40,000 other neurons. So it can be the link in a pathway that is constantly changing, or taking in new information and forming kind of new information. I think I told a story there's a great study in the States called the NUN study. It's a fascinating study, where in the 1950s, they took groups of nuns. Why? Because they were discrete populations that they could follow over time. So and what they did is they gave them questionnaires and looked at their lives, and they looked at their health and their well-being and stuff over the last 70 years. So the nun study's still going on, because there's still some of these nuns that are alive. But as the nuns that were involved in the study, some of them gave their brains to the study, to science, to have a look at. And there's been a number of cases now where the brains being examined have been found to have all the changes associated with dementia, particularly Alzheimer's, even the destruction of parts of the brain. And that this puzzled them, because the nuns in real life hadn't shown any signs of dementia. So
Mm.
this was weird. They had the amyloid plaques, they had the tau tangles, they had literally parts of the brain destroyed. What they discovered was, though, that the brain had managed to make new pathways around the damaged part, linking other parts of the brain, such that they coped with life, that it made no obvious impact on their function as a human being, both mentally and physically. And this is astounding. So our brain actually has the power to heal itself by the formation of new neural pathways.
Wow.
And this is called plasticity, this neural, and there's a whole, now there's a whole science behind brain plasticity, as we've understood that our brain actually has the capability to change, to heal, to make new neural pathways. So from both a physical health point of view, the health of the brain physically, but also the health of the brain from a mental health perspective, this is exciting news, because it means we're not stuck where we are. We actually have the power to change the way our brain is forming these new neural pathways, so we can work around, if you like, those difficult areas, both whether it be a physical issue or whether it be a mental health issue. So brain plasticity is the new wonder, is the new, and there's a lot of science and a lot of attention being paid to the way that we can play with stimulating these new neural pathways. And there are
Wow.
lots of ways that we seem to be able to do that. And so as we understand that more, we're gaining more power over our mental state and our mental health. And that's exciting.
Absolutely. And of course, that became the basis of our Blokes Talk Beachside meeting the other day when you were talking about building a better brain, strategies for maintaining a healthier, happier brain. And of course, the point we're making there is and you're saying we can consciously choose to change our neural pathways. But of course, if you are unconscious about this, once you realize that the brain is plastic,
Yeah.
that therefore, if we are constantly thinking of what we don't have, what's not working for us, our problems, all of the negatives in life, it's not just a matter of think negative or think positive. We literally are, if we constantly dwell on those things, we are going to be developing, that's your point, it's either a dirt track to, as Tony Robbins talks about, a dirt track to happiness and literally a highway to hell.
Yeah.
You make some comments on that.
Sure thing. Look, the way our brain works, when we're born, and depending on the neuroscientists you talk to, the ratio will vary, but they say at least 50%, maybe up to 80% of the neurons, the brain cells we have, are unconnected. So obviously there's functions that we're born with.
Yeah.
We suck, we cry, we do all those sorts of things. Those, hopefully, those neural pathways are intact, already there. But there's a whole part of our brain which is basically disconnected. And it's both the great weakness and the great strength of us as human beings. It's the advantage we have over the rest of the animal kingdom. So, if a horse is born and you get this colt, within an hour, he's standing up. Within a couple of hours, he's gambling. We don't say gambling much these days, do we? He's gambling around the paddock, being a horse. Why? Because he comes pretty much pre-wired. So within hours of being born, he's being a horse. We're not like that. We have, yes, these fundamental pathways in place, but we have all these other pathways disconnected. Why? Because it gives us the ability to adapt to our environment and make connections as per our environment. So it gives us great flexibility. But what it means is that we need all these years of care. Basically a horse is born. Yes, it suckles on its mum, but it can be a horse from pretty much day one. We are these tiny little helpless babies, and we have such a long period where we kind of grow into adulthood. And that first 7 years of life, we are making all these neural connections in relation to our environment. Our environment stimulates it. So our physical environment, but also our emotional environment, our parental environment, the influences of the people around us, and our neurons start making connections and trying to work out this world. What is it? The brain's job is to make an internal model of our external environment. So it's working hard to do that, and it has to work hard over a pretty lengthy period. But by the age of 7, a lot of those neural pathways are now intact. And over the next 7 years, we'll still continue to learn and to make improvements on that, or attachments. But then after that, we start to prune off what the brain deems as unnecessary. So if we've got spare neurons hanging around that haven't made connection, they get dumped. And so why? Because the brain wants to work efficiently. Now, how do we form behaviors? If you've ever ridden a bike or learnt to ride a bike, you know that initially you're not very good at it, but with persistence, you get better. So what's that doing? So you start learning to, and the brain starts trying to work it out and making connections that are going to fire your muscles in the right way. And that initially is like, I often liken it to, okay, someone's in the jungle, they've got a machete, and they got to kind of hack a pathway through the jungle, and it's hard, it's difficult, and they got to kind of find where they're going. But once they've made a path, the next guy comes along and goes, there's a bit of a path through the jungle. I'll take that. Why? Because it's easier. And then he goes, and then others go, and then so the path gets suddenly wider and more well used. And then eventually it becomes a road, and eventually everyone's using it and it becomes a highway. So you've got this initial difficulty in finding a pathway, but once it's established, as forget the great neuroscientist that said it, but what fires together wires together.
Hebb's law.
So yeah, so as we use the pathway more, it becomes more efficient. We get better at what we're doing, and it becomes automatic. It becomes a habit. So we have, and then because the brain is incredibly concerned about efficiency. Your brain uses about 20% of your energy. So it wants to use that energy very efficiently. It doesn't want to waste energy. So once it's got a pathway established, that becomes a habit. So if you haven't ridden a bike for 20 years, but you get on a bike, within minutes, you're happily riding the bike as you did 20 years before. Why? Because you established this great neural pathway and it's working well. Now, we established neural pathways for all sorts of things, not just our motor activities, but our thinking as well.
Yes.
And the thinking about who we are. Like people think, oh, that's not who I am. Well, who are you?
And where did you decide who you were?
Yeah, that's just a neural pathway that's got formed. So if your parents were abusive or someone in your life told you what a schmuck you were and told you often enough, that becomes your belief, that becomes your neural pathway, particularly when we're young, because when we're young, we don't have a filter yet. People who seem to have authority in our life have a lot of power. And when our emotions get triggered, those pathways get established very quickly and very powerfully. So we're often holding on to ideas about ourselves that are erroneous. They're not the truth. They're just the truth as we perceive it to be. And we perceive it because of those early influences. So a lot of people's, trauma, and not just trauma, sometimes the positive aspect think about ourselves, have positive stuff that was done to us, said to us when we were young. But
You're great. You're special. I think directly Bob Hawke's mother telling him very early on he was so special, and he was going to be a leader. He was going to be prime minister one day, and all of these. I mean, Elvis Presley's mother telling him how special he was, and he was living the life of two people. Like, it goes on and on. These conversations and lines, for, as you say, at crucial moments, forming really the seed of a highway, a neural pathway. You just repeat it over and over again. My mother told me I was special. In fact, John Cougar Mellencamp's mother, Cougar Mellencamp, almost died. There was a documentary. He had some big neural nervous thing. I think 4 out of 5 people who were operated on died, and he didn't. And his mother literally told him his whole life, you are special. You are a gift. You'll do great things. I mean, clearly that's going to make a difference versus you're a schmuck. You're a loser. You're going to go nowhere.
correct.
Yeah. Incredibly powerful.
Yeah. And so overcoming those negative highways can be a challenging thing for people. But as you were saying before, when you consciously become aware of this and this is how your brain works, you go, oh, okay, now I can perhaps choose a pathway. It doesn't have to happen to me by accident or happenstance. I can actually now consciously choose to be who I want to be, choose to think what I want to think, and make neural pathways that are actually going to support me in my life and empower me in my life and give me kind of new directions and a new attitude and new possibilities and probabilities.
Absolutely. If we're talking about empowering, if we say give people power, one, the choice to say, well, you actually do have power, which is what you're saying here. You do have power. But then it starts to be, what are the daily habits? We talk about daily practices. What are the daily disciplines? So let's move into that. What are some of the daily disciplines that you recommend? And you certainly made those recommendations the other day. So some of the ones that jump out at you. So these do make profound impacts on people in terms of daily, almost doing the reps. What would you say in terms of brain health?
Yeah. First of all, I would say that people who are suffering mental health difficulties, this is not medical advice, but this is what the research is telling us can help in the journey. And I am not saying that this is any of this is a replacement for their therapy, for their medication. Don't think you can abandon those.
No.
To do everything I'm talking about in discussion with the mental health professional that's working with you. But
it's supplementary, as you say. So it's an incredible scaffold around which to tie in with, like 1 + 1 is 5. Your medication and your therapy that you're doing now with your medical professional. But what we now know from the latest neuroscience, when you add this, it makes an incredible positive difference. Would that be a way of saying it? Yeah.
Yeah. This is not an either, it's an and.
Yes. It's 1 + 1 is 5. Exactly.
Correct. So what is the research telling us? Unequivocally, exercise, physical exercise is not only good for your body, which we know, it is good for your brain.
Yeah.
One of the things that we know is that exercise stimulates a growth factor in the brain, BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which stimulates, or is a protein that helps stimulate connection. And it seems to be probably involved in this neurogenesis. When new cells are produced in the hippocampus, it stimulates that. So when you stimulate more connection, then you give your brain a greater ability to make new connections. When your brain's got a greater ability to make new connections, you have a healthier, happier brain. So exercise has been shown in the research again and again and again to be as effective, and in some cases more effective, than the medication people have been given for depression and anxiety in particular. So why wouldn't you be exercising? And you don't have to be in the gym for hours a day. Walking, most of us can do. Walking has been shown to be an incredibly powerful stimulator for the brain, for a sense of well-being, and for the health of both heart and mind, heart and brain. There's a great study actually came out of Leicester. It was only about 12 months ago, and they looked at University of Leicester, and they looked at almost 400,000 people in the study.
Wow.
Over a 12-year period, and these were 50-year-old plus. And about 22,000, I think, died in the 12 years of the study. And part of the study concluded, was looking at activity levels of those people involved. And there was, they divided these walkers in the group into brisk walkers, kind of medium-paced walkers, and slow walkers. The brisk walkers had a 71% less chance of developing dementia.
Wow.
In their lifetime. Wow. Now, 71%. That, in terms of medical research, that's huge. You rarely see that sort of figure. And this is just from walking. And this dovetails beautifully because it's about brain health, obviously, but it's also about mental health, as the two are so closely correlated. But again, the research supports this exact thing. Brisk walkers, daily brisk walkers, have way lower incidences of depression, anxiety, and other mental health issues. So
it's incredible.
Simple take home, get out and go for a walk every day.
But, as you're talking there, what we know from a mental health point of view, and I've written the word new connections, because we're talking about new connections internally, but what we know is connections with other human beings are such a critical factor. And when you're saying walking, I'm immediately thinking at Cottesloe and a range of other places, people pretty much always walk with someone else. And while they're walking, they're also talking. And the whole concept of talking, healing, problem solving, I mean, a whole lot is going on in the walk. It's not just, in fact, if anything, it's physical, it's mental, it's social, it's emotional, and somewhere in there, it's may or may not be, it's certainly energetic, but if we said physical, mental, social, emotional, there's a whole lot of stuff going on in that brisk walk, isn't there?
Absolutely there is. And again, the research is clearly indicating that, particularly interestingly with men, when men walk in a group, particularly when they're not facing each other, which can be a bit confrontational, when men walk beside one another, they tend to share more.
Yes, men talk sideways.
Yes.
Men talk sideways. Not to say, I was saying to a woman the other day, I remember having great conversations with my mother in the car. Often at night it was dark, so we didn't even see each other, and they were some of our best conversations.
Yep.
So it's not only men talking sideways, but certainly, as I said, like golf games and a whole range of other things, a whole lot of stuff's going on versus we sit across a coffee table or a bar, and even in the bar you're talking sideways. So yes, isn't that interesting? Talking sideways.
And it brings us on to that. The very next thing I was going to say, as well as exercise, and look, these can be all forms of exercise. Nothing, just move. Particularly, it seems to be doing some form of strength work and some sort of aerobic work, improving what they call your VO2 max. We won't go into that, but doing a component of those, you're a swimmer. Where again, you're doing a beautiful marriage of both those things, both strength work and aerobic work, particularly when you're swimming distances. And I know that you do it as a group thing.
Yes.
as part
There's
of your.
connections again. Connections again.
Oh,
Literally, a guy was walking past yesterday as I was doing my shoulder warm up before swimming outside Northcott Surf Club, and he was walking and talking with someone else. And as he walked past, because I often say good morning to pretty much everyone, and he went, "Motion is the potion." I went, "Wow, there's another T-shirt. Motion is the." I thought, what a great line. He's got that from somewhere, but what a great mantra. Motion is the potion.
it's so
Um, yeah. Yeah,
it's
but you're right. The aerobic thing, and of course, again, a lot of research has gone on in and around ocean swimming. And coming back to it's the swimming, the social connection, the social connection before, during, and particularly after at the coffee shop. All of the conversations we've got, people going through marriage breakups, births, deaths, all health scares, all sorts of things, and job issues, family issues, and all of this conversation, the sharing of information and strategies and different points of view and what other people have been through. It really is a village, the power of the village, and we'll get on to loneliness in just a second as a health risk. But the exercise and nature, the power of nature, which I know this morning we were out there swimming, just going, these conditions right now are absolutely perfect, and the whole connection, and again, coming back to gratitude, we'll talk about the power of that also. All of these things are happening in the one morning daily practice. It's just incredible. So you want to touch on some of those factors that the researchers talked about there in terms of nature, gratitude, and also the loneliness factor.
Look, there are multiple studies now on how powerful us getting into nature is, particularly when we exercise in nature. So it's like there's a compounding effect. Yes, we get improvements and we get stuff happening just from exercise, but when we add exercising in a natural environment, or just even getting into a natural environment, the improvements in mental health, in lowering depression, lowering anxiety, improving cognitive function. There was a great study where they looked at runners running in an urban environment like streetscapes, and then runners that ran in parks, by the beach, through forests, those sorts of things. And when they tested them after their runs, yes, there were improvements in both their bodily function and their cognitive function. But those who ran in natural environments had about a 20% improvement over the others.
Wow.
In their cognitive function. So their memory, their ability to think through problems, all that sort of stuff was improved dramatically by running in nature. And I guess if we don't have to look too far back in our history to realize that's where we, before we built these concrete jungles, that's where we were. And in those natural environments, we function better. And for us now, we need to make the decision to get out into those natural environments. And it also behoves government, councils, etc., to regularly maintain, put up, create those natural environments within our urban environment. So our parks and things like that become so vitally important. But also, you and I, we live in a city that's close to the ocean, on the ocean.
Yeah.
And we have the power of that natural environment to call on. So
it's quite incredible. Even just take that one point. I know Basil, the mayor, there's a whole policy on treescaping. Like if you drive through, Nedlands or East Freo, these very leafy suburbs, but you go further north where they've bowled out down everything, Alkimos and some of these other joints, and there's no tree at all. They are two completely different human experiences.
Yes.
And I know even up in Singapore and other places where they're growing plants on buildings, one, because it's good in terms of air conditioning and cooling and so on. But again, from a human evolution point of view, you feel better in and around greenery, which again is one of you think back to Kings Park, the strength of vision. And I know, in fact, as it works out, I discovered it was a Farnell in Parliament in New South Wales that helped build and get the national parks committed down around outside of Cronulla and so on there. The importance of ringing cities and creating, as you say, green spaces, because it's just so easy. Let's bowl everything over and put houses up. No, no, folks, we actually need trees for people's mental health.
Yes.
Quite incredible, isn't it?
It is incredible, and physical and mental health. And yeah, no, you're exactly right.
The other thing there, Greg, is I was talking to someone yesterday, Chinzia, about the importance of bare feet on ground. Years ago, I'd go, oh, what a load of hippie bullshit, But I know myself, of a morning, there's something quite special about, because I literally wear my thongs from where I change down the boat ramp because I'm such a wimp. I know winters does, so why have wet, cold feet on the concrete when I can have thongs on? But that very moment of hitting the sand with bare feet and walking down into the water, I mean, without being too religious, it is like there's a grounding and a connection factor going on. And then certainly the first time you go under the water, so today's like 10 degrees ambient temperature, the water is sitting at about 18.9, 19. So mildly chilly, but quite in a bang. And then at the end of the swim, walking back up the sand, and of course, by that stage, you're full of serotonin and dopamine because you've done the swim. That whole grounding thing, walking in bare feet, but so then they say, walking in shoes all day on concrete, never your feet touching soil or sand or grass. It's first of all, for let's say 299,000 years, humans have not had that experience. They've actually always been barefoot. And then this last 100, 200 years, people could go days and days and weeks and weeks and weeks without skin hitting ground. Any comment you have on that?
Yeah, I know that there's, as you say, the whole thing about, they call it earthing. So earthing, right. Apparently we run best when we're alkaline. Our bodily functions, our gut runs better when it's slightly alkaline. When we get too acidic, our pH change and we go into that acid kind of role, our body has issues. And the reason we become acidic is when we build up, and it's got something to do with hydrogen ions. And don't quote me on the chemistry, people.
Yeah.
But actually, the guy who talks about this, a human biologist at length, is Gary Brecker. I think his name is Gary Brecker. A great guy to listen to. Really, really interesting human biologist. And he says, no, it's actually science that we build up too many electrons, and that pushes our pH up, and we attach too many electrons to a hydrogen ion, which pushes us into this pH that takes us into the acidic thing. And he advocates earthing, like going out bare feet on real ground, because what we do when we earth, like we do with our electrical,
the static or the charge changes.
Yeah, our stuff has to earth. Now we earth our houses so people don't get electrocuted when they touch their taps and things. Because if there's electricity running through the system and it's not earthing, you'll be the earth. But he says we spend all our lives now, as you say, insulated from the ground. Whether it be our brickwork, our paths, our concrete, our shoes, our feet never touch real earth. And so we don't get that earthing effect and drop off these excess hydrogen electrons. And so we build up this acidity, whereas we are better when we're more alkaline.
Which again, bare hands doing gardening, remind you, if we're wearing gloves, it may be different as well, but you can see people gardening, that whole connection with the earth thing that you hear people talk about in regard to, I love being out in the garden it's like, what the hell? But yeah, I think I'll rather walk on the sand myself, but the same, as you say, electromagnetic effect and the changing. I mean, certainly I'd heard that in the past around that internal pH in terms of health and even cancers and tumors and so on, what it does. So amazing. Let's talk about gratitude and awesomeness that you spoke about the other day, which I thought was super important points. Let's talk about that in terms of mental health and brain health.
Again, there's, gratitude practices have been kind of all the rage, I guess, for the last 10 years or so, particularly people like Brené Brown brought it to people's conscious
Well, in
mind.
the West, of course, but in the East, the Buddhists and a whole range of others, it's been thousands of years. It's new to us, but not so new to a huge chunk of humanity. Yeah.
Well, in fact, I guess back in terms of, in religious, even Christian religious circles, being thankful has been
Yes.
and you read a lot
Well,
of
that's part of grace. Let's be thankful.
Yeah.
To pay, like say, to God, but be thankful for the food we eat and all of these things. Just exactly.
Yeah. So, but we've moved away from these gratitude practices. But again, the psych research clearly shows that when you regularly partake of a gratitude practice where you focus on the things that bless you every day, whether it's a roof over your head, whether it's a food in your stomach, whether it's your partner, whether it's your kids, whether it's a beautiful garden you walk past, you are building neural pathways that are getting stronger in terms of looking at and seeing the positive aspects of your life.
Yes.
So that's really what it's about. And we know from the research that we have this, what they call negativity bias. So we are wired, this is early wiring, this is our primitive wiring, if you like, our reptilian brain. This is the stuff that comes pre-wired. We are pre-wired to have a negativity bias, to see the negatives. Why? Because it's about us surviving. When we were, back in the days running around on the plains of the Serengeti, we had to make sure that lion, that we noticed that lion hiding in the long grass. So continuous scanning, looking for stuff that's going to kill us and eat us. And so we have this negativity bias. Why? Because our survival is imperative on this negative bias. Unfortunately, when we're not in an environment where those negative things don't necessarily exist, we are constantly looking for them and perceiving our environment through that veil of negativity. Now that becomes a problem, particularly for our mental health. And I think the psychologists say for every negative thought we have, it takes 5 to 15 positive thoughts to kind of outweigh that negative thought. Such is the bias that our neural system has. Such is the weight that it gives out that negativity. Now, when in the modern environment where we're not having to worry about the occasional line, but people are being stressed in their work environments, in their family environments, trying to make income, there's so many subtly stressful things that we're kind of dealing with on a daily basis.
Different types of lions and tigers.
Exactly. We can live a whole life out of this, looking for the negative and perceiving it, whether it exists or not.
That's right.
But we're seeing it that way. And so our brains are being wired to the negative, wired to be pessimistic, cynical. And as a result, our mental health is at risk. So we have to actively now do things, strategies that are going to take us from that negative wiring and point us into or create positive wiring. And gratitude practices are one of the ways we can do that. Very powerful.
So literally going to the gratitude gymnasium and building up your gratitude muscles, because in the absence of that, you're going to build up negativity muscles because we're kind of in nature wired up that way.
Exactly. And we've all met people who are like that. There's nothing positive going on in the world.
Yeah.
They see everything through this negative filter.
Yeah.
And
well, you're just reminding me of two guys I know who use the word blessing quite often. A mate of mine who is actually a hemophiliac, And in the 80s, when he was getting regular blood transfusions, in those days, the blood wasn't filtered. So a number of people either got hepatitis or AIDS, and a number of the guys he used to sit with to get blood died around him. So he ended up with type B hepatitis. But he goes, I'm blessed. Like, I'm blessed to be alive. And then a guy, Chris, that I did a podcast with the other day, the South African jeweler, he's blessed, mate. Bless you, bless you. There's something. I mean, straight away, the neural pathways around either I'm blessed or I bless you. It's a blessing to meet you, which is a form, as you say, of I'm saying I'm grateful to have met you. It's great. I'm feeling grateful that we got together today. It really is a form of going to the gratitude gymnasium, isn't it?
It sure is. Absolutely. And what's interesting is that gets back to when you were talking about connection, how important connection is to our mental health, is that Andrew Huberman talks about this, is that the research around the most powerful gratitude practice. So every day I write 3 to 5 things that I'm grateful for.
So I was going to ask you, what are some of the things you do on a daily basis? So thanks for telling me. So one of the things is you 3 to 5 things. And what time of day do you do this? In the morning, the afternoon, the evening?
I tend to do it in the evening.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't really matter. You can do it as a morning, or you do both if you like.
Yeah.
I do it as an evening practice.
And what is it? A little book you've got, a hard-covered book? How do you do it?
Yeah, I do it. I've got a book that I write in. It's
fantastic.
a notebook, and I journal in it as well. So
and what benefit do you think that does for you? When you're doing that, how does it make you feel, and what benefit do you feel you get from it?
It always gives me, no matter what's happened in my day, that may have been, and look, all of us have positive and negative things that happen to us.
Sure.
And we, again, because of this negativity bias, we have I always say, as a physiotherapist, it's really interesting. Like, I might help 100 people, and there'll be one person I haven't been able to help. And what occupies my thinking? That one person I haven't been able to help. I'm thinking, oh, what could I have done differently? Maybe I missed something, blah, blah, blah. And I'm so engrossed in this negative thing, I've forgotten about the 99 other guys that walked away going, oh, thanks very much. That's much better.
Changed my life. Yeah.
It is. We do this. Why do we do this? We forget all this positive stuff, and we focus on this element of negativity, and we blow it up out of all proportion. We stick it in front of and that's all we can see.
Yes, and it becomes our reality, and it's not real. It's just part of reality.
Yep. So when you have a practice that forces you,
yes,
to look at, okay, what were the great things that happened to me today? Oh, actually, I met so-and-so. That was fantastic. Oh, I did help all these people.
Yes.
And my wife cooked an amazing meal tonight, whatever it might be. All of a sudden you go, and that thing that's been in front of you, occupying all this attention, kind of gets smaller and smaller and takes its place in the proper order of things, instead of it kind of being so blown out of all proportion.
Great exercise, mate. Great tip.
To me when I do it.
What other things do you do on a daily basis to help you with your own brain health and physical health?
One other thing about
sure.
practice, Andrew Huberman says this, is that what seems to and again, the psych research is very clear about a gratitude practice and how the positive effects that has on you, on our mental health. But the most positive thing from a gratitude practice is that when you do something for someone else, they say thank you to you, it has even a greater effect, a positive effect on your mental health and sense of well-being. So again, it's all part of our intimate connection to one another and how positive that is, our need to be together and so on. That the king of all gratitude practices is doing something for someone else that elicits a thank you. So it behooves us to be the sort of people that do things for others, because it actually, selfishly, it works for us.
Well, of course, it ties in with Maslow's hierarchy. Self-actualization is to actually a cause higher than yourself, doing something for other people. That it's not about you, it's about others. And as you say, ironically enough, that's the most healthy thing of all to be doing, to be doing things for other people, and not, in many ways, not expecting anything. But when you do get the thank you, I used to do some theatre, and at the end of it, the show, people say, "We love the show, we love the show," and I did, I felt uncomfortable getting all this gratitude, and I watched other people more experienced than me go, "Thank you, I'm glad you enjoyed it." And finally, just to be able to say to someone, "Thank you, I'm glad you enjoyed it." It's like, wow, well, that's how you deal with it when someone gives you. And then there's that beautiful exchange rather than you, the person saying something nice to you and you go, "Oh," and you're feeling all uncomfortable. But what other things, because you're reminding me also when I do a workshop and we do feedback sheets, and let's say there could be 15, 20, 30 people in the room, and because there's all these people saying it was great, and then there's that one person, and we over these, my business partner at the time said, let's not even look at the feedback sheets at the end of a workshop, because often you're so fatigued, you've put a lot of energy out.
Yes.
Let's look at it the next day or the day after. And you're in a much better physical, emotional, mental state to actually take whatever feedback's there.
Yes.
But again, otherwise, because as I say, you blow it completely out of proportion. It's completely disproportional. So you triggered that in me. I'm reminding I got to be careful when I look at those. And then even then, usually you go, how do I take what they've said there and turn it into something, a Kaizen moment, as in how do I take it to improve things, as distinct from feeling like I should just give up and never do any training ever again, So thank you for sharing that. Leigh Farnell's human as well, people. I mean, some people doubt that, but that's just true. But give me one other daily practice that you do, Greg.
So an awe practice.
Could be an awe practice. Anything else you do that helps you with your own physical, mental health in terms of you leading your best life?
Shall I talk about the awe practice?
Okay, sure. What do you want to talk about? Yeah.
Awe practice, again, this is from the research.
Awe practice. I'm going to make a note of that.
Or AWE. What do I mean?
Awe practice. Yes, great.
So
I don't know why in my head I'm going OR or even or as in rowing. What is he talking about? Okay, go with it, whatever. So absolutely.
Rowing oars.
Yeah. No, you're talking a sense of awesomeness. Yes. Tell us about that.
Correct. Yeah. Sense of wonder.
Yes, beautiful.
I've got grandchildren now. And I love them to bits. Got 3 of them because they are so in awe of their natural environment, of the environment around them, how things work. And again, it's all part of them making sense of the world. And whether it's seeing a bug walk across a pathway and they stop and they examine in minute detail this, and they're fascinated by it and they watch its whole journey, walking, whether it be a slater bug or a cockroach or, but they're fascinated by it. A snail creeping its way across a path, and they're so fascinated by it. And we've lost that sense of wonder and awe at looking at our natural environment, and even the stuff, even our human stuff that we make. I'm sitting in a chair, I'm watching you over this amazing instrument across the internet, which just blows my mind about what that's all about. We don't understand it, we use it, but it's amazing the stuff that we're surrounded with. And if we just took enough time in our day to sit in wonder and awe about the things that we have around us, even about even the biology of our human body. We've been discussing it. It's just awesome. Now, I say that because, again, the psychology research shows quite clearly that us being awestruck actually improves our mental health. Wow. It lowers our sense of depression. It lowers anxiety. It improves our positivity, our optimistic view of the world. When we're awestruck, whether we're looking out into the cosmos, whether we're looking out across the ocean, take opportunities every day to sit in awe. And what it does is it brings you into the moment. And, we know the whole mindfulness movement and how positive mindfulness is for our well-being, and that's another thing we can talk about, is meditation and mindfulness.
Mm.
Why? Because it gives us the opportunity to be in the moment. Why is that important? We as human beings have two fantastic skills. We can go into our past and think about our past, and we can project into our future. Now, we can either reflect on our past, and I see reflection as a positive thing. We can bring up something like you're saying, you give a talk and you think, oh, how could I have improved that talk? And that can be a positive thing. I can reflect on, I could have done this, I could have said that, I could have moved here, I could have engaged with the audience, whatever it might be. So we can reflect on it and improve our performance. The other thing we can do is what they call, or the psychologists call, rumination. We can bring up stuff from the past, the negative stuff that's happened to us, and we can relive it and relive it and relive it and relive it. And as we've talked about those neural pathways being established, all we're doing is putting ourselves back in those negative situations. Now, our brain, our subconscious, doesn't know the difference between reality and something vividly imagined. So we're not only thinking about that situation, we're reliving it. We're putting ourselves through the same emotions. Even our body will respond to it. Like if we had an embarrassing experience and you're thinking about it again, you know what your body's doing? Your body is curling in. It's going into that, oh my, and you even thinking about it, you're putting your hands to your head and you think, oh my God, your shoulders are forward, and you've put yourself physically into the position of that embarrassing thought.
And the internal chemistry, the cortisol, all the internal
Absolutely.
neurotransmitters, you're reliving it chemically as well.
Exactly. Yeah. And so all those effects are creating a problem for you, are creating a situation where it's a very short step into depression and anxiety, where you needn't have been, because it's not happening to you in the moment. It happened to you way back then.
5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
Exactly. But now you've relived it. You've re-strengthened those neural pathways. You're making that highway, that wire together, fire together pathway nice and strong again, so that you can.
And you've poisoned the present moment. You've just brought up some junk, garbage, manure from the past and put it into the present. And instead of seeing how beautiful the sunset is or how beautiful your grandkids are, you're thinking about something some football coach said to you when you were 13 years of age or whatever it happens to be. Don't worry. And so it comes back to that consciousness of mind. Look, Greg, I can see we're going to need to do another session because I'm conscious of the time here. And I'm just going to go through my notes in no particular order. In your case, trauma to blessing, the trauma of those early years, and already the toxicity, the alcohol factor. Obviously, when you're talking about the drinking from a kid, we see this in people as well. But then this rumination as a toxin to be verse and reliving that toxic past. pH and acid and base, that internal chemistry. You being a personal development tragic, but it all coming out of your mum. And you and a 14-year-old in the MLM, Lou Tice, Think and Grow Rich. The point you make, the way out is the way we think. Blessings, awesomeness. Let's just go through some of the daily activities. Exercise, connection, nature, new neural connections, gratitude practices. The 1 to 15 ratio, as you say, we almost need 15 of those positive versus one negative. We talked about motion is the potion. Mate, there's so much fantastic stuff we've covered. And clearly you're way more than the physio, muscles and musculoskeletal. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you'd like to cover before we wrap up today?
As you intimated before, and we spoke about briefly, but that whole thing about connection is, I would put connection and exercise probably as the two greatest tools that we can use to improve both our physical, but particularly our mental health.
Connection and exercise. Yeah.
Connection is so important, and we haven't really got into that today, but the whole thing about loneliness, I think in my talk I mentioned the Surgeon General in the States talking about how loneliness is seen, the physical effects of loneliness they've worked out now is worse than smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Crazy.
That it's worse than the effects of obesity. And we know that up to now, that the two strongest indicators of an early death are smoking and obesity. And what he's saying is loneliness is worse than those two.
Crazy.
It's crazy. So we have a loneliness epidemic at the moment, even post-COVID. So for us, for people to work for connection in any way they can is going to be one of the signs of a healthy person and a healthy society. And I know you're doing specific work in that. And I'm now a member of a number of groups purely because of this information. Like I'm actually a person who's very comfortable in my own company.
Yes.
I can happily read a book for hours, watch motivational YouTube.
Yeah, watch Lou Tice. You've got all those videos and DVDs and tapes you can listen to. That's right.
And look, I love connection. I love my friends and all that sort of stuff. But I can happily go days without. But I've realized, you know what? It's a trap.
Yes.
And I have made myself make new connections, both group wise and now I'm focusing more on my close friends, making sure that I don't get to that I treat my friendships with the respect they deserve.
Yeah.
And that I don't let them fall by the wayside or wither on the vine. For all the days of my life, my friendships are going to be vitally important to me to maintain.
We talk about the R factor. The relationship is frequency times quality of contact. R equals F times Q. Talking of contact, I'm going to go to your website so people know how to get hold of you. Greg Diamond Speaks. Greg Diamond, live long and prosper. Spock, I like it. So check it out, folks. This is how you get hold of Greg. You want him to be talking, speaking to your company or your group. Greg, we will talk again to talk about things we haven't talked about today, and we certainly want to get you back to Blokes Talk Beachside. And what we're doing at Blokes Talk Beachside is we're forming a solid connection with a group called Men's Talk, and so we'll introduce you to those guys as well. But folks, there's been so much great information. So get in touch with Greg there at Greg Diamond Speaks. Fantastic, mate. Greg, it's been absolutely fantastic talking to you today. We'll set up another time as well and continue our dialogue. But I do appreciate all the great information, the great work you did at Blokes Talk Beachside, but this fantastic podcast we've done today, mate. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Leigh. Thanks for the opportunity. You're very generous with your time and attention as well. And I love the work you're doing. It's fantastic.
Very kind, mate. Thank you. I'll see you very soon.
See you, mate.
Thanks, mate. Bye.
God bless.